Thank you so much for joining. And I
You're very
think,
welcome.
well, I always think of the Ibec programme as probably the best HR graduate programme in terms of exposure and that's out there. So we're delighted you came. So for those maybe who just got my email and don't know that much about it, would you tell us a little bit about the programme?
Yeah, of course. So Ibec is a huge organisation that I have to confess I didn't know an awful lot about when I was in college. So it's essentially it's a business representative organisation. So the department that I work in is called the Employer Relations Department. So we would work on issues that relate to employment law, to HR, to occupational health and safety, although that's not my own part of, and just HR best practice generally. So what our department would do would be to advise members on issues that relate to employment law and to HR. We would also lobby in relation to new employment law legislation that's coming in. So our employment law solicitors would lead the way on that front. And then in addition to that, in terms of the broader Ibec role, it's actually the largest lobbying organisation in Ireland. So we would have a number of different trade associations. You might have heard of a few of them, like Retail Ireland would be one of the better known ones. We have the Irish MedTech Association. So what those organisations do, or what those trade associations do, is that they would lobby on behalf of members that are in that particular sector of the economy. So obviously Retail Ireland lobbies on behalf of retail members and also provide advisory services to them as well. But in terms of the Employer Relations Graduate Programme, it's based in the ER division, and so it relates to that kind of employment law, HR and IR best practice piece.
Perfect. And will you tell us a little bit about the programme in terms of how long it lasts for, the kind of stuff a graduate would get to do in the programme?
Absolutely. So it's an 11-month programme. It used to be a 9-month one, but we've recently extended it. So I did the programme back in 2015, and it was 9 months at that point in time. But I think 11 months is probably a better length because it really gives you the opportunity to spend a bit of time in each of the areas in our department. So the way that the programme works is that when you first join, there is an induction period where you get to know the organisation, because as I said, there's a lot that goes on in Ibec. So get to know the organisation, you get to know the different teams within employer relations, and also as part of that initial period, you actually do a certificate in employment law, which Diana knows all about at the minute. I know she's in the middle of her assignment in relation to it.
Oh yeah, that's a good one now. And then the exam comes in a month's time. Yeah, so fun times.
So I detect a little bit of sarcasm, but it is a great it's a great thing to have, because I think, you know, when you first go into an organization and when you leave college, it's great to demonstrate that you're taking part in that kind of the CPD piece and continuing to develop yourself professionally. So the diploma, or the certificate I should say, in employment law is very employment law focused, obviously, but it's delivered by, so the lectures are delivered for the most part by executives in Ibec. So a lot of them would be from my own team. So I'm on the advocacy and representation team within the Employer Relations Department. So my job would be to represent companies at cases in the WRC and in the Labour Court, and to advise them on the day-to-day piece as well. And so because of that, I think it's great that it has that kind of practical focus, because when we're delivering the presentations, we're looking to, I suppose, make sure that everybody is aware of what the best practice would be and what the potential risks are in the scenarios that we're talking about in the workplace. So for example, when we're talking about, you know, rest breaks and working time and making sure that employees have, you know, all of the appropriate rest breaks, we're also able to kind of give it that, I suppose, deliver it from the perspective of somebody who would deal with common issues and common pitfalls that arise in different environments and different types of employment scenario, because obviously not every company is comparable to the next, and different issues arise in different types of companies. So it's great to have that kind of practical piece as well as the academic piece. So then that diploma, at the end of it, it's certified by DIT, so you get your piece of paper when you graduate, and it's another thing that you can add to your resume. And then after that initial first few weeks where you're taking part in that certificate, you get to go through the rotations on all of the different areas within the employer relations division. So The Knowledge Centre would be our key kind of at your fingertips advisory piece. So the Knowledge Centre would contribute to all of our online publications. So we have the HRM Guide, which is a great online resource for employers to use. They also contribute and manage our HR Link, which is a regular kind of electronic magazine and e-zine that would go out to our members with all of our updates on the most recent trends and data and any updates in terms from a legislative point of view. So the Knowledge Centre will contribute to those two pieces, and they'd also give advice on the phone to members. So that's one area that you would be able to rotate into. The other area that you'd be able to rotate into is the employer relations advocacy team. So that's my own team. So we would be involved, as I said, in defending cases before the WRC and the Labour Court. So it's a really in-depth experience that you get as part of the Ibec IRHR, or the ER program as it's now called. So when I was a graduate, I was actually given the opportunity to present cases before what was then called the Rights Commissioner, or the Adjudication Officer Services now. So it's really brilliant to be able to have that level of responsibility within a graduate program. Now, of course, I had all of the support in the world, and an executive came with me to that case and assisted me in the preparation for that case. But it was brilliant to have that opportunity to actually present a case before an adjudication officer and see it all the way through to what the outcome was while I was on the program. So our aim is that graduates would all, within the program, that every single graduate would have the opportunity to represent before the WRC. So I think that's something that's really unique to Ibec. Yeah, and something you wouldn't necessarily have elsewhere. But before you get to that point, of course, there's the experience that you get in writing the submissions. So we don't just throw you in at the deep end. So at the minute, for example, Diana is working on some submissions for me and for some of our colleagues. So to get that experience in how we write the submission. So the submission is the document that we would submit to the WRC in advance of a case, and it's the document that would contain all of your arguments and all of the relevant legislation, and the appendices would be the relevant documents that you're relying on in defence of your case. So for example, going back to the working time example, if somebody said, well, I worked over and above what I should have been working under the Organisation of Working Time Act, and therefore that act was breached, your appendices would likely be, well, the records to demonstrate, hopefully, that the employee didn't actually work over and above their the statutory entitlement. So I suppose that is a brief whistle-stop tour of some of the experience that you get, but you also get to work in the legal department, which would be the employment law solicitors, and additionally to that, you get to rotate. Now, I mean, it's a bit different this year with COVID and everybody working from home, but generally speaking, you would get to rotate into our regional offices as well. So we have regional offices in Galway, Letterkenny, in Cork, Limerick and Waterford. We also have a Brussels office, but unfortunately you don't get to rotate into that one as an employer relations graduate. So you get the broader experience of, I suppose, working within each of the departments and also within one of our regional offices as well. So it's a brilliant programme. It's very broad in that sense.
Do you still do a company placement, or is that not there?
We do actually. Sorry, you're right. We do, and I neglected to mention that. So we do a company placement. It's a month long, so you'll be placed in with one of our member companies. So it gives you that experience, I suppose, from an in-house point of view, as well as from a representation and advisory point of view as well.
Brilliant. And I know, so when do your applications close?
The applications close on the 30th of November. So it's I suppose coming up to that date now. So definitely, if you're interested in applying, if you go onto the Ibec website and you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the homepage, you'll see a section on the left-hand side that says Careers and Life in Ibec. And if you click on that, it'll bring you to the page, the recruitment page, and you'll see the link for the graduate programme there.
Brilliant. And I'll actually include the link in the chat there in a few minutes. What else? How many do you take every year?
5 graduates. So it was 4 when I did it, but we've expanded it now to 5. So so it's 5, and it's 5 out of, we normally would get 100 to 200 applicants, but it's a very niche program. So I'd say get the applications in, and when we're looking through the applications, one thing that I'd say is that, make sure that you're attentive to detail when you're submitting the applications. So just, that they're grammatically correct and that there are no typos in it, because that's something that we would look at as well.
Okay, so if you were to think maybe of 5 or 6 skills you really want in a graduate, what do you think they might be?
Well, I think first of all, an interest in industrial relations, because I think it's funny that every year that I give these presentations, I seem to say, well, this year is a really interesting year in industrial relations in Ireland, but it just hasn't stopped since I started.
Yeah.
There's something new going on all the time. So an interest in industrial relations is definitely a key, something that would definitely be a benefit. If you have any information or any knowledge from an employment law point of view, I'd say that would be a benefit, but not absolutely essential. But really what we're looking for is people who are hardworking, who are able to work on their initiative, who, again, attention to detail is huge, because, of course, when you're defending cases and when you're giving advice, you need to be able to comb through the employment law with a fine-tooth comb. But I think that there are lots of different backgrounds that we would pull from. So, I would say that if you don't have a background in employment law, it's absolutely not, I suppose, the end of the road. We've had people, I think one of our graduates before had formerly been a nurse. We've had people who were formerly Gardaí. So it really is quite a broad pool that we would pull from. So definitely, if it's something that you're interested in, put that application in.
Okay. And would you be looking for them, say, to be reading the industrial relations news and looking up the WRC cases? Is that the kind of interest that you're looking for? Or is it just to say, look, I'm doing HR and I think I'd have a real interest in this? Or do you want them
both.
to have?
I mean, it's not something that we would be, I suppose, if you're interested in the IRN and if you're reading it anyway, then that's absolutely great.
Yeah.
But I think it's not an entrance exam either. So I think if you have the broader knowledge, and if you have some interest in going into management or going into HR, then, absolutely that's something that might be of interest to you.
Brilliant. And can I ask you, what do you think are the biggest 2 or 3 IR issues you guys are dealing with in WRC at the moment? Like, what are the...
From an industrial relations point of view, I suppose there's one thing that's of interest at the minute is the Labour Employer Economic Forum. So that's something that Ibec are involved with, which is, I suppose, and as are the Irish Congress of Trade Union. So it's a dialogue between the stakeholders. So Ibec, from a representative point of view, from representing the employers' interests, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and obviously there's a government presence as well.
Yes.
So that's something of interest. I think this year has been a funny year for industrial relations, because what we're looking at now is it's an economic disruption that wasn't, I suppose, foreseen. So it's difficult to predict what the next year is going to bring. But certainly, I think if you were to look back to last year, we would have seen a lot of industrial action in the health sector and threats of industrial action in the health sector. So that was a huge focus for my team, and certainly for myself at this time last year. Going into the future, in terms of the types of cases that we would predict to have, I think working from home, and the fact that so many people are working from home at this point in time, is going to be a huge focus for the next 12 months. From a case law point of view, there are some interesting anomalies that could throw up from an Organisation of Working Time Act point of view, because it's that bit more challenging to manage time from an employer's point of view when people are working from home. So that's certainly something that we'll be keeping an eye on. Pay trends are going to be huge, because what we see is that some sectors of the economy are going to be struggling, whereas other sectors of the economy might not be struggling to the same extent. So absolutely, we'll be looking at pay trends. Some companies might not be in a position to increase pay this year, and others might be. So that's something that will be a huge focus for 2021 as well.
Okay, brilliant. And so I think those are some of those questions kind of come up a little bit on the application form. So people apply, and then they do the application form, and then would you mind talking us through what happens next, actually?
Yeah, so you submit the application form. The deadline, as I said, is the 30th of November. The next stage is an online assessment stage. So it's probably similar to what you've heard of with other graduate programs as well. And so once you get through the application stage and the online assessment stage, the next part is the in-house assessment day. So, I mean, obviously COVID, depending what the plan is that, or what normally would happen, is that there are groups of candidates brought in over 2 days. So there's a morning session and an afternoon session on 2 days in a row in January. And what would happen there is that there would be a number of face-to-face assessments. So there'd be a written assessment, there's a fact-finding assessment, and there's a group assessment and an interview. And then what would happen from there is that the final applicants then go forward to the final stage, which would be the final interview.
Fantastic, thank you. And oh, go on, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that it's on that assessment day, what I would say is that the fact-finding exercise is a little bit unusual, but not to be, I suppose, intimidated by it because it's new to everybody. But the group assessment is a really important one as well. So really looking into how people interact with each other and also can make themselves be heard as well on that piece of the assessment day.
Okay, brilliant. And can I ask you, say somebody is submitting their CV now as part of this, what attracts you in a CV? What's going to make you guys say, look, do you know what, they're for us?
Well, I think, and again, it might not necessarily be one thing over the other because, as I said, we've pulled from quite a broad spectrum in the past. But I think, again, going back to the interest in industrial relations, it's not that you need to know it, I suppose, to be able to recite, the Industrial Relations Act or anything like that. It's not that level of detail that we're looking for. It's the interest that I think we're looking for. So a general interest in what's going on in the world of industrial relations. If you have experience in that field, then that's brilliant. But really to be able to demonstrate that it's an area that you'd like to work in.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. And I see a question there coming through the chat. So I invited some of the part-time students as well. Now, some of them have got degrees and they might be doing their CIPD diplomas, as a top-up, but others are doing the CIPD diploma and maybe don't have a degree. What's the minimum entry requirement for you guys?
The minimum entry requirement, I think it's, let me double check that. I'm actually, not 100% certain of that. I might have to come back to you on that piece. I think it is a third level, but I'll double check that for you and I'll come back to you.
Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. And my other question then, because I can see some of my master's students joined us as well, and some of those might be international students. So can you look at people who would be on a stamp 1G visa, which means they can work for 2 years if they've done a master's? You can.
It's an 11-month program, so yeah, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Do you know, something that I was asked as well on Instagram is just what makes you love it?
What makes me love it? Well, I suppose there's 2 pieces to that particular puzzle. I think what makes me love Ibec is the people. So Ibec has a great culture. We've been awarded a Great Place to Work award for the last number of years in a row, and I think a huge part of that is that there's just the level of camaraderie in Ibec. I can't even describe it. It's everybody has an open door policy. You can lean on any of your colleagues at any point in time and we'll always help each other out. So I think it's something that's really important to me personally, but it's not just within the employee relations department, it's throughout Ibec as a whole. So that's the first thing I would say. But in terms of the role itself, I think what I love about it is the variety, because one day you could be advising a company that's maybe a technology in the tech industry, or the next day you could be advising a hospital who would have a totally different set of collective agreements in place to each other. And I suppose it goes from representing in the WRC as well to that advisory piece. So when you're advising people from all different sectors of the economy and all different industrial sectors as well, and people with different roles, one person's role might be compensation and benefits, so they're looking to know what the pay trends are. Another person's role could be more from an employee relations point of view, so they'd be more maybe managing performance. So there's a huge level of variety. You'll never be bored if you work in Ibec.
Yeah, sounds great. And I see another question there actually that I missed in the beginning, but somebody's asking me, will you look at return to education graduates? So I suppose what that is, maybe a mature student who's come back to college and is doing their degree now.
Absolutely, yeah. 100% we would, and that we've some of our graduates from previous years, in fact, have been people who have, you know, gone back to change their careers, either having gone back to college or just having come straight into the graduate program from another type of a role. So I think a couple of years ago, one of our graduates had worked in finance previously and decided that they wanted to go into a HR type role, and they participated in the graduate program, and now they have since left Ibec and are working in one of our member companies. So absolutely, that's 100% something that we consider.
Oh, thank you, Aisling. And actually that leads me on very nicely to another question there, which is, say, right, you take 4 or 5 people every year. At the end of 11 months, what happens to them?
Well, some of them would stay on in Ibec, which is obviously what I did, whereas other people would go into roles, usually HR type roles, whether in our member companies or possibly in a company that isn't a membership. But what we do find is that people who finish the program and who opt not to stay on in Ibec, or if there isn't a role for them to stay on in Ibec, they're not long finding another role, because the experience really is, it's not just that it's broad, but it's also quite in depth. So, you know, it's hugely valuable, I think, to any role in an organization, whether it's a HR role or whether it's another role in another area of management. So we've had graduates that are in all different areas, all different types of companies, and and they tend to keep in touch as well. So what you would often find is that I could end up with a former graduate on my case list who's now one of my contacts. So it's brilliant to see.
Yeah, and actually, I think, well, from back in the day, one of our graduates, Gavin is now one of the judges.
Yes, exactly.
Report.
Yeah, he is.
Possibilities, I think, are endless from it.
Absolutely, and in fact, we'd see them in the most senior of positions in a lot of different organisations as well.
Yeah. And how diverse is Ibec then? That was another question that just popped through the chat.
Yeah, well, I suppose diversity is one of our values in Ibec. So absolutely, it's quite a diverse workforce from all different perspectives, you know, diverse in age, diverse in experience. It's hugely diverse, and as I said, it's one of our key values as well.
Brilliant. And I see another question there, and it's actually something I should have asked you and I just forgot earlier, was about the regional offices. I don't know if that's so I remember before, but actually I think Leah, who's asking it, is from Dublin, but I think before, could you say if you were from Cork, would you be put in the Cork office or something like that? How does that work, and how long is it for?
It's a month-long placement, and it often would work out that way. So if somebody is from near an area or has a preference, it's obviously something that would be considered when they're being allocated their regional offices. But if it's the case that, you know, you're not from you're from Dublin, and, you know, Limerick isn't somewhere where you'd have accommodation, obviously Ibec would put you up. So that's, you would have your accommodation covered for that month.
Brilliant. Sorry, now I see another question there. I'm just going to, because I'm conscious of time. So are you working from home at the moment, or do you go into the office?
At the moment, we're working from home, as we're in level 5. So I suppose we'll wait and see what the future holds, but I think we're probably looking forward to getting back into the office at this point.
And so what's the question? Assuming everyone's returned to work, will you still get the chance to move around the offices? So I think the deal is, James, you go to one office. Isn't that the situation, Aisling, or did I misunderstand that?
Oh, you would go to one regional office, and it's one regional placement. But within the Ibec office, in terms of the different areas within employer relations within Ibec, it doesn't make a difference if we're working from home or if we're in the office. You would still have the opportunity to work with the Knowledge Centre, work with advocacy and the legal services as well. Oh,
brilliant. Now, is there anything, I don't know, can we ask Diana how she's getting on and what she loves about it, or are you okay with that, Diana?
Feel free. Do
you want to tell us, because I'm conscious we've about 3 or 4 minutes left, and it would be great to hear from you. Look, how did you find getting in, and what do you love about it?
Right. So as Aisling said, it's very intense, and I would advise whoever wants to apply for this program just to spend a bit of time and put some thought into the application process, because it's where you start. Like, if it's a good one, it will give you a strong chance to be progressed further. The process, so you'll find out if you're successful or not at the beginning of February. So it's kind of long process, but that's not to be something to put you off. In terms of work, it's so diverse, and it's fast paced, and I love it. Like everybody's so nice. You get to do so much. Like my day, like you can't do one thing during a day. Like there's things that you have to juggle, and people would ask you for help. And the more work you do, the more experience you gain. And we started 2 months ago, but you kind of you get to work with different people that hold different position. Yeah, so Aisling, for example, she's my mentor. Yeah, she's a brilliant mentor, and she gave me work. Then depends on rotation. So I've started with the advocacy, which was like you had to write submissions, you had to do a lot of research, which means you get to learn what to research different cases that would help other executives to answer any questions, and that's amazing. Then in terms of it's kind of up to you to arrange your day, yeah, like providing you do the work. And if you have any questions, it's just you have to email or text somebody, and they will able to help. So it's been 2 months, but it's been like we were wondering, me and the other 4 grads, where did time fly? Like it's incredible. And like I'm glad I got to Ibec. So whoever wants to apply, it's a brilliant place to work. People are amazing, very supportive. Even though we started working from home, we started remotely. I haven't met any of the people that I'm working with at the moment. But that was not something to interfere with our way of working. And HR has been very good. They put in place different meetings where we had to introduce ourselves and then kind of meet other people virtually. So I don't know, like me personally, I didn't know about this program before I applied. And but it's a good one. It's a very, very good one. And the knowledge that you gain, 2 months, and I can kind of navigate through the information that we're given, and it's intense. So people have to know that it's not like, oh, we are going to sit down and do nothing. It's nothing like that. It's like you have to do your work, but you are given constructive feedback, and providing you are taking that on board, you'll be grand. I mean, as Aisling said, they don't expect you to recite articles and acts. Yeah, it's important for you to know where to find the information and being able to put an answer together and being able to ask for help if you don't know, because nobody knows everything in Ibec.
Oh, thanks, Diana. Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing I should say as well is that there's a huge amount of support available to the graduates as well. So as Diana said, I'm Diana's mentor, but in addition to the mentor kind of relationship, there's Sinead, my colleague, is in charge of running the graduate program as a whole. So she would be linking in with the graduates, I suppose, regularly as well. And in addition to that, when you're placed within teams during the rotations, so not necessarily, I'm not talking about the regional rotations at this point in time, but the actual rotations within the Dublin office. So if we look at the Knowledge Centre, the advocacy and the legal services, when you're placed within those teams, you're also given a contact within that team. So while I'm Diana's mentor, she's also, during her advocacy rotation, she was placed in a small team unit within the department as well. And so she would have been reporting to a senior executive in that team as well. So there's loads of different points of contacts and loads of different supports available to the graduates too. And again, just to build on what Diana said, it's not necessarily down to what you know when you come in the door, because that's brilliant and it's a huge help. But the start of the program is there, in order to build that knowledge and to make sure that the practical elements are there as well. So there's a lot to learn in that first few weeks when you're going through the lectures that are associated with that certificate. There's a huge, there's an awful lot of support there before there's the expectation to kind of assist with the executives. So yeah, just to kind of flag that as well. And the other thing that I'd say as well is that at this point in time, we have a really active well-being in Ibec. So we're making sure that while people are working remotely, that there are loads of virtual events that can be attended. We're getting, for example, a bake club up and running. So we'll be looking for people to lead us through different recipes on a weekly basis. We've done an awful lot of we have weekly Pilates. We have, I think, a resistance. step challenge. We have resistance training coming up. We've done an awful lot of kind of remote painting events, those types of arts and crafts types events as well. So just to say that, you know, there's a huge kind of social culture within Ibec as well. So an awful lot of supports, but also in addition to the open door, everybody's dying to get to know each other. And so it really is a great place to work.
Brilliant. Oh, thanks so much, Aisling and Diana. Look, I'm really conscious of time, and so I think we're out of time. But I want to say thank you. I don't know, I've been listening to people talk about this for a number of years, but I just think it sounds like the most interesting, exciting graduate program.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I'm still here 5 years later, so no, that has to be a good sign.
Yeah, like what Sinead was for 20, like our supervisor. Yeah, so she started 20 years ago, the same program. So
and an awful lot. The other thing I'd say is that an awful lot of people within the department have done the graduate program at some point in time, and so everybody knows what it's like to be new. Everybody knows what it's like to be a graduate, and we value the graduates hugely. So, you know, we really look forward to seeing them every year, and I hope that you all apply. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Aisling MC Devitt. You'll find me, and I'm sure Diana is contactable as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like whoever, like you can email me, text me. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to share you some tips and hints. Yeah, with the application process. It's a bit difficult, but it's doable. If I did it, trust me, everybody can do it. Like I've never believed that I would get to the final stage, and here I am. So do apply, and because it's lovely. Like everybody's so nice, and just make sure you shine. Yeah, show your personality. That would be the main point.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you, Aisling and Diana.
Thank you,
Thank you to all the students as well. Thank you.
You're welcome. Talk to you later. Bye.
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 Bye. Jack, I just see the education requirements, in terms of level 8. I'll absolutely come back to you on that. My gut is it is a level 8, but I'll find out. And I might just pop the link in the chat to make 100% sure you all have it. Look, I really hope, let me just